Next we've got Philip Kohn. Philip Kohn works at NIH doing cool things with brain imaging during the day, and at night he does all kinds of interesting visual technological art. I've worked with him in the past on some projects, and he's capable of some very, very cool stuff.
Okay, so I'm going to try to talk about 3 different things. I'll see how far I get with this, but I'm going to start with the most recent, which is something I'm sort of throwing together in the last month. Since Thomas asked me to present, I figured I should do something new, and something I've been sort of thinking about for a while is looking at the internet as a way of connecting images. The internet's really good at connecting information. Like, you can find out almost any information you want related to any other information. Thank you. I can always do this. I can make a whole musical thing out of that. That might be fun later. So yeah, you can find out information about other information really easily, and you can find people, who are buying or selling or have the same interests or whatever you want. So the internet's really good at connecting people and really good at connecting information, but it's not so good at this point at connecting graphics and imaging in some sense. So my idea was to try to make a way in which you would have sort of a stream of consciousness. I mean, the internet, the World Wide Web is almost like a memory system of some, growing organism in a way. I mean, it sort of has like all this information, all these connections. Can I make a stream of consciousness through that I show pictures? So, so I threw this together using a lot of open source tools, which are really wonderful these days. You can really get like, amazing things that you can work with really quickly. And so what I did is I have a Pro program that uses an existing module called Mechanize, which allows you to basically send queries out to the internet with HTTP. And so I have it sending off to Google. So basically you started off with some words. In this case I started off with the words Dorkbot, art, and strange. And I put exclamation point after Dorkbot, which means you'll keep Dorkbot in the search, even though it's going to change the other words as it goes along. And so what happens is it does the Google search, Dorkbot, art, strange. It pulls up the first 10 pages. It gets their content and sorts through it, does like a really rough, down and dirty sort of content extraction. Looks up the words, uses some database to get rid of. There's a great database in Stanford where they've actually done analysis of all the words on all the web pages on the internet, and has all the word frequencies for like a zillion words. So I use that to sort of get rid of the most common garbage. And then so it ends up with a list of new words. And it sort of chooses the best one based on a bunch of different things. And it will do another Google query where it replaces the last word with a new word, sort of moves all the words down, except for Dorkbot, which of course is always going to be in there for this particular search. And then, so that's how it does sort of the stream of consciousness just in the space of concepts. Then the other level is that it's also doing the same search into Google Images. And it turns out there's a nice Perl module called Google Images where you can just, hand it a query and it hands you back a bunch of pictures. Then I use this image magic tool, which allows you to convert any format to any other format. So I convert all the images that it gets into some other standard format. Anyway, so this is the problem with showing something that you've actually been hacking on the last day. In fact, I hacked on some this morning. So it gets back a bunch of images from Google Images. And then, so what it does is it tries to look for images that are similar to each other. So it does basically an edge detection on each image and tries to find images that have similar edges. Okay, this is a very primitive way to go. I'd like to do something much more sophisticated than this, but I only had a few days to put this together, so that's what I did. So what you're seeing, those images fading in and out, are sort of the best image that's found so far for that particular location. So it's going through about a dozen images that it has, and it's trying to figure out which place to stick the new image. And this takes a long time, even after optimizing the inner loop a lot in C++. I should say there's a whole C program, which is doing the real hard work. So the Perl program is doing all this internet stuff and is passing off words and pictures to the C program. And the C program is actually putting them on the screen using this SDL library, which is really nice and very simple. It's simple direct media layer or something. So anyway, so the C program is like trying to figure out how to move these pictures around. It has like an inner loop that's very tight, but it's still very laborious because it's like basically taking every image, looking at every place it might be, you know, every size it might be, and counting out how many of the edges like overlap with the edges of the image that it's trying to go on to, okay? So when it finds the best one, that's why I put up these intermediate results, so it isn't totally boring. I came up with this actually this morning that actually shows you the little images. What I had before was words that sort of float around, and maybe I'll show that. But I had to come up with some sort of pacifier to keep people interested because it takes it like 15 minutes to really find the best place. And that's another thing I really need to work on. There's some fancier algorithms I could probably throw at this to do it a lot faster in terms of image matching. So anyway, when it finds its best match, it then will zoom this really slow transition from one image to the other. And I got this idea because I do a lot of photography, and I got one of those digital picture frames, which I figured I'd load a lot of my favorite pictures onto and just sort of see, what it'd be like to have them like always displaying. And I had it on a slow fade, and just very occasionally it would fade one image into another, and the effect would be amazing. It would be really cool. Like you'd see something in one image, like just very slowly. Into something else, and there'd be this intermediate state where you're not sure what it's going into, and it's sort of ambiguous, and I really like that. At some point I'd like to do some art project with very slow photographic transitions. But so the idea here was to make, there's an advertisement there. None of this is planned. Actually, we're not running live, so that's an unfortunate thing, because I was planning to do a couple more things on top of this, which was actually have a live search. Like this is actually a search which I ran this morning. Luckily it caches everything on the disk because I was afraid that Google might basically shut me down if I was constantly, doing all sorts of automated queries, because I've had problems with that in the past whenever I've tried to hack things. I do automated queries, they're pretty sensitive about that at a certain point. Robots, they don't usually like them. So I have a cache, and since I couldn't get the internet to work here, I'm just running off the cache from a query that I did before. So that was one thing. Was I was going to, sort of have people call out words, and I was going to throw them in there and sort of see what things come up. And the other thing I was going to do is actually use this to illustrate my whole talk, since I didn't actually prepare any PowerPoint or anything like that. I got this word recognition software, which is again open source. This is from Carnegie Mellon. It's called Sphinx, and it's been around for a pretty long time. And I brought a little microphone, and I was going to basically like take words I was saying, instead of like randomly going through the web and just sort of like finding new words, it would actually take words that came from the microphone and try to find images. So this would be a system where, if you come to a talk and you're not prepared and you don't have any PowerPoint, it automatically makes PowerPoint for you as you go along just off Google Images. And that would have been really fun, but unfortunately, since we're not live, I can't really get all that. So maybe some other time I'll come back and demo that. Unfortunately, the word recognition software is pretty poor, so it gets a lot of strange words in there too, which can be sort of amusing in a way, but a lot of times you wonder, where these images are coming from, because sometimes you say one thing and it comes out with a very amusing thing that sounds a little bit like what you said, but really totally different words. So that's sort of a problem with that. So I was just going to let this run a little bit while I talk about the other things that I'm going to talk about, but I'll stop if anybody has questions about how this works or ideas.
You might be able to get a license from Google as a developer, especially without shutting down.
Yeah, they had a mechanism by which you could actually get a license, but they recently shut that down for some reason. Really? Because I tried to follow the instructions in one of these other Pro packages, and I got to a website that basically said it didn't.
Just go straight to Google.
Okay. So it used to be you could get a developer password, and when I looked, it wasn't.
I think I've tried to do the same thing, and so maybe I had shut down. They saw the API one.
Yeah, they have a new one, which they have a new API, which of course there's no full support for, which So I think they're transitioning.
Jamie Zawinski from the Netscape Emacs fame had a program called Web Collage, and he did essentially the same thing except there was no blending. But the cool thing he did, he would sniff the local traffic, like a local network traffic for images, and also project them. So you might want to... Yeah, I tried that in some corporate setting. It doesn't work very well. But another thing is, he also was hitting this problem of like hitting the image searches too much, so he used multiple different ones. So he will, like, for example, query Yahoo, Alta Vista back then, Google, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, well, luckily my algorithm's so slow that I don't really have to worry about it too much at this point, but I'm hoping to improve it some more so that it will be faster. Maybe that will become... That's a good idea, though, using other image searches. Yeah.
So you're trying to match edges? Did you think about matching colors in the image instead?
Yeah, I mean, what I'd really like to do is some sort of segmentation, and then actually match sort of segmented areas, maybe based on texture and color, or maybe just on shape or some combination. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot better ways to go than just the edge thing, but I have the edge code that I got, so it's quick.
When you were doing this, has any image actually come up automatically? Kind of like the first image that comes up, it comes out of image.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand your question.
Perfect match first time.
Oh, the perfect match. Yeah, well, when you start the thing off, the first thing it shows is some big Dorkbot announcement. And actually, I can't remember the exact keywords I was using, but it brought up a lot of web pages from this local chapter of Dorkbot, which was really sort of fun to see that we actually have a very good presence as far as this particular searching thing goes. It was pulling up all sorts of pictures of people who had presented here and some of their work. So yeah, it's surprisingly good. I mean, Google is pretty good at getting... Oh yeah, I forgot to say what the name of this piece is. The piece is called Feeling Lucky. So maybe I should have said that first.
The searches you're using are for the names of the files that are the image files?
No, actually I could do that. It has sort of two separate things where it's using regular Google to figure out what words to come up with, and then it's using Google Image to find images based on those words. But it's true the file name also contains all sorts of interesting stuff in it that I noticed I was going to wonder might be fun to play with.
Maybe you could do a similar thing with keywords on Flickr or something.
I thought about doing YouTube with some stuff, and actually getting the videos and then sort of homogenizing those maybe one day.
One cool thing that we're thinking about doing is, if you go through doing both the shape analysis and color analysis, the pictures where they take an original picture and then they take a series of smaller pictures put together, and then you get a zooming effect where you kept zooming in, kept getting different pictures, but the overall effect was of the image. That might be a cool transition.
That's what I'd really like to see. I mean, if this thing were working really in real time, you would see it sort of zooming in and then zooming in. You'd be constantly moving into the image and you'd be changing into something else. And that's really what I hope to do. This is just very primitive sort of first attempt, but that's exactly the sort of effect that I'm looking for. Is that sort of continuous zoom, through images and concepts.
Well, you might want to look at a Microsoft presentation at TED. What they did is they took like a corpus of Notre Dame pictures from Flickr, and then they positioned them in space, like a projection kind of thing, so they would zoom through it and kind of move through 3D space of these pictures. I don't know how to explain it. You really have to see it though. I think that kind of overlaps the ideas in your project and their project.
Yeah, you can give me the website after.
Yeah, I'll definitely give you the...
Yeah, I love that.
I think one of the cool things that they're doing with that was taking all these pictures and sort of leaving 3D information out of it as well. So you could sort of move around the image and get three-dimensional information. It wasn't in any of the individual images, but then they could triangulate that.
Yeah, no, I'm really interested in 3D things, so I'd love to hear how to do that. I'm not sure what to do with that, but that's... I fascinating. Tell me about that later. I want to know. Yes.
There was a similar thing at the SIGGRAPH too, where it was an image correction algorithm. What they would do is it could mark a part of the image as wanting to get rid of it, and it would then do Google searches on like millions and millions of pictures, and it would find the ones that are the very closest match to your picture, and then it would fill in the empty spot. So it might be another water scene, and then all of a sudden it would put a sailboat into the spot where they cut it off.
That sounds cool. Yeah, I know that Google's working on some sort of image search. I mean, a lot of research has been done into like, if you have some picture in your head, how do you search for it? How do you find pictures that look like it, you know, without using words necessarily, or by having some verbal description? But I think it'd be interesting if you could even do something like that.
There's a project, I think, from a professor at Penn State called Alipr, A-L-I-P-R, that attempts to basically take known tags of an image, find images with physical similarity to it, and then apply the appropriate tags to those images as well.
Yeah, no, I think with a learning algorithm, if you have like a huge database like, you know, Flickr of pictures with words going with them, you could try to come up with some AI thing, which I think would be really great, that sort of figures out how to match those words with those particular images. What's specifically about this image that makes it, you know, a boat or whatever it is. You know, it'd be a great project.
There was somebody's website about 2 years ago that took Flickr and just matched the color by color. And they pulled up similar colors.
Yeah, color's an easy one, shape's a much harder one.
What if you did color with this color in space? And the color is matched to the other image's color in space, and it's close match. That's what the image is.
Yeah. I could see how also you could make some sort of space of different types of shapes. And once you have the outlines, you could try to like, you know, do some sort of principal components and figure out, you know, what the space of possible shapes is. And, you know, which would have a lot of dimensions, but I'm sure you could do some sort of like similarity match with that. And that's sort of the direction I want to go rather than this edge thing. But the edge thing is quite free. It doesn't require much work on my part. Okay, on to the next thing.
Nice work.
So I'm going to talk next about this piece called the Looking Glass. I'll pass this around. This is a Fujitsu stylistic 3400, which is a type of PC that actually Thomas turned me on to when we met at the Artomatic. I was looking for some sort of cheap tablet to make interactive video with, and he had been using these stylistics for a while and said, hey, you can get these on eBay for $30 or whatever it was. And the ones he was using weren't quite, you know, doing what I wanted. They weren't color and they weren't quite fast enough. But so I found these, which is sort of like a, you know, step up. But actually found someone on eBay who worked with me once I told him I was doing an art project. He became very interested, as a lot of people seem to when you tell them you're doing art and technology. You know, people are often like willing to give you things. And he gave me a deal on a lot of 8 of these for about $50 each. And it's a pretty nice processor. It's 300 megahertz. You know, nothing, you know, that fast, about as fast as a PDA these days. But it does have a color touch screen, and it does have USB input for a webcam, and it does run Linux reasonably well. Even the touch thing I sort of have working. And so it's a nice little platform. It's extremely cheap. The ones which I got from him didn't have a hard drive. Those are very standard and also pretty cheap these days to get a small one especially. And so I made a few of these framed interactive video things. There's one over here which you can come up and take a look at some point. But basically what there is one of these tablet PCs is mounted behind the frame. It's got a webcam that's hidden, and there's a little hole in the map for that. And when you are in front of it, you know, all sorts of strange things happen. So, you know, the question is, what can I do with this? And the idea that popped into my head once I started playing with it is I can make people move around. And so the way I do that is I reward movement by making interesting graphics, and I punish not moving by making them disappear totally. So it's a little bit like a Cheshire cat. I mean, the first time I used it, it was a lot like that. Because I would stand still and my whole head would disappear, except for my mouth and my eyes were still moving a little bit. So those would still stay on there, but basically the rest of me would sort of go away. And then, once you've gone away, you can do interesting things like you can move your arm, and then just the arm appears, and your body's still missing, so it's this disembodied arm can move around and do things. So, on the positive side, in terms of rewarding movement, I have a lot of different modes and effects that every time you move, you get a more extreme thing happen to you. And if you stand still, the effect is much more mundane.
Back to this application, medical application. You have x-rays or whatever, your doctor, you're going to find somewhere in the world where there's a similar, and the solution is there, but it's not necessarily in the language that you speak or phrase the way you spoke it, but the image is there that matches it, and therefore the solution may be connected to it as well.
Yeah, we have speech recognition for images, so that when you say something, it, through some sort of neural net or some sort of AI process, it knows which images you're referring to. You'd have to have a huge training center. You have to sit doctors down, which they don't do very well, by the way, and get them to say a lot of things.
You bring up your x-ray, you got a problem that you don't necessarily know how to solve. And that x-ray is then sent out and finds other x-rays that are similar, that are on the database, where you don't explicitly say anything about it, but it finds similar x-rays.
Yeah, could work.
That's illegal.
Yeah, right. Actually, I should mention that.
You can get licenses in order to do that. I mean, you can't do it straight away without any permissions, but you can do it with permissions.
Yeah, I think that's really, so I have one of these which I've been showing at National Institutes of Health where I work. Actually, now it's been in operation for, I think, 4 or 5 years there. And it's been pretty much continuously there. It's in a glass case near the Starbucks. If you want to go see it in the new wing of the clinical center on the first floor. And one of the things that happened with this was, speaking of HIPAA, the original version of it actually had a video loop. So when you looked into it, not only did you see yourself, but you saw other people who had been standing there before looking back at you, and you could see what their response was, and you could do things to them and all that. And the curator there informed me right away that that was not going to fly, since it's in a hospital. That would be, that would break various HIPAA rules. So I had to make a variation where it basically wipes the memory out of the minutes and you still have a fresh slate. So
Yeah,
HIPAA.
sign the form.
Yeah. No, I'd love to have something like that. A button you push it. Once you inform consent, then who knows, some horrible. Sorry, I get carried away.
I've been watching the screen, and 2 of the same possible matches. No, one of the same photos just popped up in this one as another one.
Yeah, and I noticed that, and that is absolutely not supposed to happen. There's actually a specific thing where it's never supposed to bring up the same. It will show the same photo sometimes a couple of times when it's in its searching mode, but it should never actually zoom into the same photo twice. Yeah, it should always be a different picture, but part of the thing is I'm running off the cache, and the cache may have run out on a particular search. I don't think so, but it's possible. But yeah, it's never supposed to show the same picture twice. And also, there's a problem with getting into loops on the search words, because it's very easy to get into a thing where you get the same word again, so it has a history where it doesn't put the same word in, for a long time. Otherwise, you get loops there too. So anyway, yeah. So HIPAA has some real implications for artists as well. So I'm going to show. I got hopefully recently, pretty soon, a commission from an organization that's not NIH called the Children's Inn, which is this foundation thing. It's this big place where children and parents stay if they're having research studies done, or if they have very unusual diseases, or if they're being treated for various things at NIH. And it's an amazing building. I mean, it's really just, a lot of pharmaceutical companies have funded this, and they became interested in, they saw this piece, and they became interested in having a gigantic one of these, they asked me, well, how big can you make this? And I sort of started telling them this and that, and I was sort of like, well, how much do you want to pay? And they said, well, don't worry about that, how big can you make it? So then I told them, well, if you really want that big, it's going to cost for the screen, and they said, oh, well, maybe a little smaller. And it took out a little smaller, actually, is a much more reasonable price. You pay a lot for every inch when you get past a certain size. And so we've been going back and forth on this, and they've said that they're definitely going to do it, though nothing's really been signed yet. And they put me in touch with this woman ceramicist, Novi Trump, who's going to make this big ceramic frame for it. And the idea is to make sort of this virtual world that kids can be in, where they can interact with little creatures that do various effects when they touch them, like allows them to fly around, or their hair to grow, or this whole sort of menu of different effects. So in preparation for doing that, I've taken this code, which I basically worked really hard to make it run at 300 megahertz and do the things that it does. And you can check it out. It does things like image warping, image spinning, like when you move, it spins you around. It does a lot of things, which was very difficult to do at 300 megahertz. I've taken it back onto a computer with a 3 gigahertz processor and sort of started to work on having a much better input than the webcam. And so this is what I'm going to show is the first version of this, which has a lot of the same effects that are in the original Looking Glass. Sorry for the
So who knows the area around here? Are there any bars or restaurants which would be appropriate for after dark? McDonald's. So nobody comes down this part of town?
There's a lot.
Chinatown's right around.
There's Chinatown. Right around the corner is District Chop House, which has a decent big open space bar. There's the Doe's down by the arch over there.
Why don't we keep it simple? The Chop House, and that's, do we know what street that's on?
That's on 7th and 11th block. So basically on this block, but yeah.
Okay, so let's call it Chop House on 7th Street for After Dork. For those folks who are interested, for folks who don't know about our tradition of After Dork, obviously we have. These aren't really seriously formal presentations, but obviously this isn't a whole give and take kind of thing. So we try to have an After Dork where folks can go and have maybe a drink or get a little bit of food and kind of talk among yourselves about whatever projects or interesting things you're working on. You ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, so I'm going to show a few effects here. Actually, I should get someone from the audience to do this, so I'm just going to stand still for a second and see what happens. So now I'm pretty much gone except for my shirt. I can do things, I can make... No, I moved. Okay. So this effect, basically what's happening is the video is going into a buffer, which once it wraps around, you'll see at some point when it does that. I should have made this a lot shorter. I didn't know I was going to run out of time. I don't know if I'm going to get through these effects. So there's Thomas appearing from a previous thing. So this, when I overlap with video from the past, what happens is various things in the luminance become part of the color. So there's this color mapping thing that goes on. I should rewrite this so that it goes. Let me just tell you while we're waiting for this to switch to the next mode. Yeah, see, now it's doing stuff. Okay, so, nope, see, I disappeared over there, so I can't really do anything. I'll tell you quickly about the last thing, which I'm not going to really be able to talk about very much. Okay, now we're on to a different mode here. What is this? I don't remember which mode.
Mirror.
Like what's some bubbles there in the center?
Bubbles? I think this is the warping mode.
Yeah, looks like it.
Yeah, so in this mode you can warp yourself. So like if you move your arm across something, you can basically make it like, yeah, you get sort of smudged in real time. You can also warp stuff that's been in there from the past, and you can do all sorts of weird stuff with that. So I'm not going to have time to really talk about it in detail, but I'll have it up here if you want to look at it. Is the last thing I was going to talk about, which is this piece called Pastry, which runs on the 3D laptop. And my face is warping. Yeah, the fun thing about the warping is sometimes you get this like warping in your heart. It seems like your heart is like beating. People at the hospital took a lot of interest in this, but it's because your chest moves and it starts warping it all over the place. So this runs on a 3D laptop. So what it is a bunch of textures and colors, and I don't have time to explain what all it is, but you can come take a look at it. Basically, you have to be in a very certain position. These laptops were made, I don't know, 6-7 years ago. Were sold for like $6,000, I think, when they came out, or maybe even more. And now they're, I got one on eBay and one on Ubid for $500. And they're sort of cool laptops because it's got a 2.7 gigahertz processor, it's got an NVIDIA chip, it's pretty maxed out, and it's got the 3D screen. The downside is it weighs like 12 pounds and has a battery life of probably about an hour, even with that. Okay, so here's another effect. So, in this effect, what's going on is time and space are being manipulated. One of the things I really love about working with this is, you have in the memory of the computer a piece of reality, and you can just, if you can imagine it practically, you can do it. And I got this idea because people were walking by the thing at NIH all the time, and a lot of times you get these images of these people just running by it. So I thought, well, if they run by it, I want to have something happen, so I want them to stretch out as they go by, so when they walk by really fast, they turn into these weird, long, strange things. And again, if you stand still, it's very boring and nothing really happens to you. So this encourages you to move around. And a lot of times what you do is you see people watching this thing, and they'll be swaying back and forth or, making gestures and stuff like that. And then people look at them and wonder, well, what is this person doing? and I think that's actually one of the most fun parts of this project is getting people to do very silly things. And then onlookers, see them and wonder what it's all about. And it's been suggested to videotape people who are actually in front of this thing, and I think that would be a fun thing to do. So anyway, back to the 3D thing while we're waiting for the next effect.
Sure.
5 whole minutes, that's a lot. So the 3D screen, the way it works is it has actually 2 layers of LCD. There's one very bright, regular color LCD, and then on top of it is a second black and white LCD that just, when you turn it on, just has all these very thin vertical stripes. So basically, it allows you to send from one eye. Okay, what's this effect? This is going to be a very choppy little talk. Oh yeah, well, this is appropriate. So this is a time sort of scrambler. So what's happening here is basically bits of time are being like reversed and forward and backward at different rates. And this would be really fun if I had time. I'd like drink some water, do some other things that would look really funny in reverse. But so anyway, so this is the time scrambling mode. Very appropriate actually for what I'm doing here with this talk. So back to Pastry. The screen actually allows you to see 3D without any special glasses or anything. You can just see it if you get your head into the right position. Because when the vertical bars are on there, one eye will see some pixels and the other eye will see different pixels. And I sort of have to reverse engineer how the thing worked, and it wasn't really that complicated, but basically it allows me to send different images to the 2 eyes. And I took some photographs that I have. I collect photographs of textures and photographs of color patterns. And so I made this thing which basically takes these texture patterns and brings them to life by adding colors from these color pictures, which it uses as palettes. So I spent a lot of time sort of figuring out how to generate good colors. In the end, what I end up doing is I have just these pictures that have colors which I really like and have them in interesting ways. And then what I do to sort of colorize the other images is I have a line that moves around in this picture and grabs colors from it and uses them to animate the other textures. Okay, so this is this mode I call Bad Hair Day. When you move, all these sort of gnarly little things come out of you. It was actually a tricky mode to make. When you stand still, all the little hairs go back in and you disappear, of course. So when you move, you get this, sort of like a virtual Tesla coil. You know, it's like, I used to do a lot of electronics and stuff, but I've become into software, so now I have to do in software what I would have done with hardware. So this is my version of the Tesla coil, I suppose. So yeah, all these little squiggles are animated with little mixtures of sine waves, and tries to get the squiggles to be similar, they're next to each other, similar colors, and all sorts of stuff. So this is sort of a beginning of like making something that was more hair-like. I mean, my idea was to have it look like hair, but of course, you know, it wasn't nearly quite like that. And it's not all that great about figuring out where the edge is. Sometimes these hairs come out from strange angles and all that sort of stuff. So that's this one.
On the 3D laptop, it looked like you were running this Linux or VSDN.
It's Linux, yeah.
It's got an NVIDIA card. Can you just pipeline OpenGL with display in 3D display?
Yeah, it does have a library for Linux actually, which would allow you to do real 3D with NVIDIA. And they have some examples of that. I haven't really played with it yet. I need to get more into OpenGL and actually exploit that. I mean, at the moment, everything I'm doing here is just pretty much frame buffer manipulation, which, you know, for my purposes is often better because I'm not really that involved with putting geometric surfaces up. But at some point, I'd really like, I mean, it would be nice in terms of the speed especially. Okay, so this is a thing where if you don't move again, nothing much happens. Now, if you do move, what it does is it's shifting through, let's do this with a stranger actually, shifting around through the luminance of the image and sort of selecting different parts. It's not what it did, but it should be doing. What it should be doing is actually scanning through the image, so when you move, you see it like sort of, you know, burning through your picture, you know, first from the brightest to the darkest parts. And there's a lot of games I play with this luminance stuff, because it really is sort of no end of fun. I'm sure many things like it have been done, though maybe not so much in the name of trying to get people to move around. So we'll read the next mode. Any questions? We've got 1 minute. I think I don't know, a few more modes to go, but.
So this is all done on Linux. What do you write all of your own software, or are you using like libraries to do
This program, the Working Class? I started off with the Linux TV program, XAWTV, and I basically put some hooks into it, sort of grabbed the video and audio, actually. I have an audio thing, and then I have it call some functions where I basically just write tons of code that just manipulates the video directly, and the audio too, in C. And, you know, over the years, and this thing started in Automatic in 2002, I think. So the code's gotten like incredibly bloated. I mean, at this point, there's literally like 12,000 lines of code there, most of which actually isn't being used, but has been different effects. I've tried, you know, there's been a version of this which had like all sorts of sound effects where it collects sounds and make rhythms out of them and do stuff like that in addition to the video. And I had one which did animations where every time you made a sound, it would take a snapshot and put them together into little animations and, you know, all sorts of crazy things that I'm not really showing anymore. But yeah, it's all basically just C code that's, you know, playing with the bits in the video.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks.